Good evening, and welcome to This Is Your Classroom. Tonight we'll be going through the various influences, experiences, thoughts and relationships enacted upon by Matthew J. Vogel throughout his life as a teacher thus far. When Mr. Vogel looks back on his time in education, he remembers being a very active, informed young boy and later on young man. It's because of such a rewarding experience as a student that he's incorporated this into his teaching. So without further ado, help me welcome Matthew Vogel. Wow, what a great honour. It's been such a long emotional journey so far. I'm just looking forward to reliving it and looking forward to the rest of my career. Well, why don't we start out tonight by talking about some of the people who have influenced you over the years? Well, Jonathan, you can't say a statement like that without my mind going directly to Carl Rogers. And he's someone who's influenced you? Oh, absolutely. Why don't you explain that to the viewers? I'd love to, Kenneth. I'd like to take you back to a lesson I ran in a grade 5-6 classroom just last year. I gave my students a scenario where they were living in a town which had recently been hit by an earthquake. The grade was split into 4 groups, and each group was given a set of characteristics which included amount of people, age, living status, wealth, health, access to food and water. Next, I got the students to answer some key questions. What does your group need most and why? What's the main resource or skill that your group has to offer and why? What's your group's biggest liability? Why? And how are you going to work with other groups in order to help your group survive? So it seems to me like a lot of the things you're doing are being done by the students and not by you. Is that intentional? Absolutely, Francis. And that's the beauty of Roger's work, as it revolves almost solely around student-centered learning. Student-centered learning? What exactly is that? Student-centered learning is an idea stemming from Roger's work around humanism, employed in the field of education. The student-centered approach puts the focus onto the students, allowing them to be in full control of their own learning, where the teacher is just a facilitator who provides ways to obtain knowledge and guides students in the right direction to obtain knowledge for themselves. Ah, I see. But now how is that any better than just giving the students the information? Oh, Nigel, so naive. The strongest point of my teaching philosophy has always been to help mould my students into active, informed citizens who will be able to contribute properly to society once I'm no longer in their lives. I'd like to quote Barbara Manny, who looked into Roger's work on student-centered learning and said the following: "Student-centered learning, when used properly, can change the face of education into a lifelong process in which the student seeks solutions to problems without complete dependence on an instructor. The student learns to reason on his own and to find a foundation for venturing out with successful experiences under his belt." Okay, I think I'm starting to understand. So in your earthquake lesson, you're attempting to teach the students how to work well in a group, become critical thinkers and to solve problems for themselves. Yeah, that's exactly right, Brian. ATL Standard 3.3 states that graduate teachers need to include a range of teaching strategies to facilitate learning. I aim to select particular strategies that require problem solving and critical and creative thinking to solve tasks. In this particular lesson, students are encouraged to solve problems as a team and think critically and creatively in order to help all parties mutually benefit from their ideas. The students are the focus of creating and controlling their own learning. I believe that they will only get out what they put in, and as their teacher, my main aim is to make the concepts and lessons engaging enough that they will want to put in the effort to obtain their own results. Okay, so we've identified your use of open-ended questioning to assist you in employing a vast array of teaching strategies. What else do you do in your classroom that you're particularly proud of? Well, Tim, something which I've shown a lot of growth to in myself is developing structure in sequential lessons. I've always prided myself in my ability to build a strong rapport with my students, and I've grown to find that this skill lends itself to better plan for and teach my students. Well, you're a very personable guy. Howard Gardner's work has been picked apart and put back together countless times, but as we see it today, his work has been based around 8 intelligences, and it's been named the Multiple Intelligences Framework. 8 intelligences? I thought people were just intelligent or they weren't. Oh, how wrong you are, Philip. Gardner's intelligences are musical, bodily kinesthetic, logical and mathematical, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, verbal linguistic, and naturalistic. All students display at least one of these intelligences and will generally display some more than others. ATL Standard 1.2 states that graduate teachers must demonstrate knowledge and understanding of how students learn and the implications for teaching. In order to satisfy this standard, I ensure I'm aware of which of Gardner's multiple intelligences are most prominent in my class. Well, that sounds pretty in-depth. Take for example my differentiated maths group on my current placement. We are allocated the lowest group in maths, and as such I can easily identify that these students are not particularly logical mathematically or verbally linguistically intelligent. So I need to teach them mathematical concepts in ways that they're more likely to understand. Howard Gardner himself states that tapping into a child's understanding of a content area in a context that is meaningful and familiar to them can help elicit abilities that may otherwise remain hidden. So what you're saying is that different learners require different methods of teaching. Bingo! So this is your classroom. How has what we've just learned influenced your teaching? An excellent question, Stuart. With my differentiated group, I must understand how they learn best in order to get mathematical concepts across properly. As a general rule, I aim to teach them in a hands-on way, emphasising the use of bodily kinesthetic and spatial intelligences. In these maths lessons, I'll generally follow a similar structure. I'll start by introducing the topic and finding any prior knowledge the students have. Next, I'll try to use some sort of visual aid, such as a Storybots video from YouTube. I then model the concept to the class using large-scale, hands-on items and writing the problem on the whiteboard. This process is then repeated, but the students are to use the process I showed them to solve the problems themselves using hands-on manipulatives. To finish, as a class, we establish the correct answer to the questions. I love it. So you use your own knowledge of how your students learn, demonstrated through Gardner's multiple intelligences, to ensure that they will be able to understand the content that you're covering. Quite astonishing. Oh, Barney, stop it. You're making me blush. But yes, by knowing my learners and using the intelligence they display, I'm able to unearth knowledge within them that would not be released without using this technique. Now, Matt, you look like a fairly active being. I'm wondering if and how you're able to incorporate this into your own teaching. I'm glad you asked, Wilfred. And as you noted, I love being on the move, and in the classroom, I believe this concept is very transferable. My goal in this sense is to ensure that my students are doing something, whether this be physical, mental, or otherwise, to work towards a learning goal. It's crucial that we take advantage of every opportunity we're provided with in the educational setting. Interesting. Tell me, do you think it's going to rain today? Pardon? Well, it just seems to me that things are getting a bit dewy. A bit John Dewey. Malcolm, you could not be more right. John Dewey states that everything depends on the quality of the experience that is had. Any experience can be educated if we use it properly. I am to use every experience my students have in order to ensure that learning is constant. So you believe that during any experience, learning can take place? Not just during, Nicholas, but before and after as well. I recently had an excursion to Healesville Sanctuary with my grade 1s, and prior to the excursion I had them write down what they were most excited to see and why. The purpose of this was so that when the information was given to them, they were more likely to notice and therefore retain it. The day after the excursion, I had my students write down a recount of the day, telling me what their favourite animal was and why, therefore cementing that information in their minds. That's very impressive, although it seems to me that excursions are always going to be educative. No? Not necessarily, Lachlan, but to better illustrate my point, I'll give you another example. One of the most enjoyable things I've done over the last 4 years is to be involved in some school camps. From here, I'd like to quote Dewey again, where he says that the quality of any experience has two aspects. There is an immediate aspect of agreeableness or disagreeableness, and there is its influence on later experiences. On a camp, I can see that in a lot of the immediate settings, students are forced to work together to obtain one desired outcome. In the long term, the ability to think critically and communicate with your peers in order to solve a given problem will be a useful skill in many different career paths later in life. ATL Standard 7.4 expects graduate teachers to be able to understand the role of external professionals and community representatives in broadening teachers' professional knowledge and practice. Camps and excursions would be meaningless if our students didn't learn anything from them. Hence the importance of using professionals in our community, as they have the skills, knowledge and expertise that most others won't. It's then the teacher's job to ensure that the students take in, retain and apply that knowledge in as many different ways as they can. Well, I have to tell you, Mr. Vogel, I am thoroughly impressed with what you've been able to achieve in your teaching career so far. It seems to me that you're able to use everything and everyone at your disposal to ensure that students are put at the forefront of learning and able to access and apply knowledge at their own free will. But if everything you've told me is true, your ability to connect with your students is what impresses me the most. because it seems that once that connection is made, everything else falls into place. Wow, Emmanuel. I don't think even I realised how far I'd come in such a short time, so I'd like to thank you for guiding me through my educational journey so far. Well, I know I speak for everyone watching when I say it's been a pleasure listening to you speak. So from everyone here at MVTV, thank you, Matthew. And good night to everyone at home. This has been Matthew Vogel's Classroom, and I have been... Man, that's strong, yeah. Wait, are we still rolling?